whenever you're ready, the floor is yours, and you should be able to share your presentation in just a few seconds. I'm looking forward to hear more about the topic.
Great. Thank you, Theodora. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Do I need to share my screen here, or do you have the slides there?
If you could share your screen, you would be perfect.
Right. Sure, I'll do.
Thank you.
Is that working okay now for everyone?
Yes, if you can just go into full screen mode so we can see more clearly, that would be great.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Looks good to me, so I hope everybody else can see the same. So thank you very much, Theodora, and thanks to Gergana and Biotech Atelier for the invite for today. I'm really happy to share the presentation. Thanks also to the PharmaLex team. There's been a few people involved in putting this presentation together, so thanks to everybody for their help. And obviously, thanks to everybody for attending as well. So today, the agenda and the title of the presentation is Innovation Regulations. So we will start with a basic introduction. We'll then go through some background and history. We'll get into some details on the changes to regulations. We look at the impact on innovation and how innovation has led to some of these changes as well. We'll then look at global considerations, specifically comparing with FDA in the US market and touching on the UK and Brexit considerations as well. And then we will finish with a summary of the presentation. So getting into the innovation to regulation. So basically for the medical device diagnostic market, we're talking about a really big market for the EU, EEA states. And what we're going to look at is the changes that have happened. So that this presentation, we think, is very timely insofar as there's been a lot of changes to regulations recently. We're going to look at the impact of those changes, the issues that have arisen and the impact on innovation, and then the future also for the industry and for the various stakeholders who've been impacted by the changes to the regulations. So just getting into a little bit of detail in the background to the changes. I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with some of this, so we go through it reasonably quickly. And the changes mainly have been to change the directives that were responsible and directly related to medical device and diagnostics. They've been changed to regulation. So this does impact quite significantly the legal aspects of the guidelines people need to follow. And it's been done mainly for better alignment and implementation for the member states. What led to this, there's been many reasons for the change to the regulations, but there have been some notable significant safety incidents in the EU. Probably the highlight one that we'd be familiar with would be the PIP scandal, and that has probably been the influence for the changes relating to supplier controls, implant traceability, and unannounced audits. Hip replacements was another significant safety issue that came to market in the EU, and this has led to other specific changes within the regulations in the MDOR, so that new clinical data is required as opposed to just equivalence. 2 years data may be required now. Transparency within Udemy, so publicly available information, and post-market clinical follow-up. So a lot of these are new requirements or increased requirements on industry in order to place devices on the market. Another significant issue with the background to these changes has been the new technologies. So as everybody would know, both within medical device diagnostics, there's been a rapid expansion of the market in the last 20 years, both in products and innovation, and in the demand for innovative new products to be brought to the market. So probably in summary, it's a timely change for these regulations. Medical Device Directive in place since '93, the IVDD in place since 1997. So in summary, you know, it is probably time for a change over a generation since the original regulation put in place. and there is room for improvement. And I think everybody would have agreed with this, that the regulatory changes, a lot of them were necessary. The intention is to improve both products on the market and publicly available information. So why make the changes? So ultimately, the aim for everybody is the same, that we'd have better product safety performance. There'll be more public available information, such as with FDA, there would be a lot more public information available on medical device and diagnostic products than there is in Europe traditionally. Better alignment across the markets. So I mentioned the change from a directive to regulation. One of the significant aspects of this is in the past, directives would have been transposed into local market legislation between each country. This is done slightly different ways, which has allowed for slight misalignment between markets. So because these are regulations, everybody's impacted in the same way and should allow for better alignment. And also to adapt to technological advances. As I mentioned, over 20 years, there's been huge technological advances, and we'll touch on some of them later in the presentation. So the changes themselves, as I said, directive to regulation, the changes have been brought into place, but there have been delays both to the implementation of the MDOR and of the IVDR. For the medical device regulation now, the full application date was 2021 after transition period of 3 years. That was extended in early 2020 for a 4th year due to the COVID-19 crisis. For the IVD regulation, there was a 5-year transition period initially, and the date of application was earlier this year in May of 2022. And that the date of application has remained the same, but there's been some changes as regards the implementation for different risk products, and there's been different dates over the next 3 to 5 years put in over that. So a bit more detail on these changes. They've been very significant as the industry has changed so much in the last 20 years. The notified body approval for products has increased. The notified body qualification demands have been increased. There's been revised classification rules, new requirements for clinical evaluation, the increased need for clinical investigations. So some of these aspects here we'll get into in a little bit more detail, but this is where the impact on innovation is going to be felt by the various stakeholders, not only industry, but by the notified bodies themselves. Post-market surveillance activities increased, and the list of GSPR requirements has expanded. So it used to be a list of essential requirements, is now the general safety and performance requirements, Annex 1. So in general, as you can see, it's more for both notified bodies and manufacturers, activities, documentation, and workload has increased. Just to touch briefly on the timeline on the MDR and how long has this been going on. So as Theodora may have mentioned, I studied in Cranfield over 10 years ago to do a master's in regulatory affairs, and back then I did a thesis on the recast of the medical device directive. So that's how long this has been going on. So it started back 2008. The end of the 3-year transition was 2020. We're now in 2022, and we're still in progress of getting the full implementation. A little bit more detail here on the delays and what that has done to the timelines. And then if we get into a little bit on the implementation issues. So the majority of these devices have yet to transition to the MDR. The certification times for the MDR and designated notified bodies currently is estimated at about 13 to 18 months. Previously, that would have been 6 months. So again, this is where we're seeing the impact on innovation. So what most companies are involved in is the design innovation of new products and bringing them to market. So here we can see already some significant impact on the innovation process and bringing products to market. About 70% of submitted applications still under review, and the progress to certification is slow. Approximately 14% of certificates have been issued so far. So looking at both MDR and IVDR both been postponed and or delayed. And why has that been the case? And again, a lot of this will impact on innovation and products being brought to market. So the infrastructure gaps that were in place at implementation date and that remain hurdles, our notified bodies need to be available. Expert panels need to be able to provide their opinions. Reference laboratories must be available for testing the performance claimed by the manufacturers. The UDMA database also needs to be fully functional. And then in the middle of all this, we had the COVID-19 impact on health services. So one of the anomalies here is that all the COVID-19 tests that have been brought to market under the diagnostics regulation will be a Class D, therefore will need reference laboratories and will be tested prior to market. And ultimately, about 70% of clinical decisions are based on IVD test results. So the continuity of care in the EU was at risk. So all these reasons together have been responsible for the delayed transition times, and it's mostly been welcomed by all the stakeholders. So the notified body approval, from this slide, you can see basically it's quite a complex process. It's a multi-stage process. And this slide is split both into the MDOR and IVDR notified bodies. So one of the main issues we face at the moment is the notified bodies qualification. Not only has the workload increased significantly, but the number of notified bodies has reduced. What this slide identifies, and this is from May earlier this year, is the application process for 57 MDOR notified bodies, down to 29 that have been approved, and over 18 have been submitted for IVDR, and only 7 have been approved. And I have a little bit more detail and more up-to-date information than that on the next slide. So in total, there are 62 applications for MDOR. 37 of these are in advanced stages, and 33 are published in NAMDO. For the IVDR, it's even less. So we have 20 applications, 9 at an advanced stage, and 7 have been published in NAMDO. So the impact of this and the unintended consequences of this is all companies who are trying to bring new products to market, which must be compliant with the regulations, are seeing that there's a bottleneck here, and that notified bodies are really struggling to keep up with the demand, not only of the existing products that have been on the market and maintaining their certification, but all the new products and the pipeline products that companies want to bring through. And just even this week, I mean, it is a process that is continuous, and even this week, the Polish notified body has been designated under the MD regulation. So it stands at the moment, it's estimated that there's 33 MDR notified bodies, and we forecast an additional about 4 by the end of this year. And for IVDR, again, significantly less, so about 7 currently notified, with maybe 2 by the end of the year. So as mentioned, their workload has increased significantly, and we take the example of any of the IVDR notified bodies. The pre-approval process that's required now under IVDR has increased the number of devices that they need to pre-approve to bring to market. Unannounced inspections also increased resource requirements, and the number of notified bodies. There's notified bodies being qualified and accredited as the year goes on, but the numbers are significantly lower than would have been on the market previously. The reason for this is that specialized resources are required. There's the implementation of many new processes. So the potential for impact for current new product approvals is at risk. And this is the impact that all these changes are having on innovation. So not only do we have existing products on the market that still need to be certified through the new system, but we have the pipeline of new products, which is the lifeline for a lot of businesses, which are at risk. So the challenge that they have is the unpredictable certification time, which will impact planned product launch dates. So we will look a little bit at the design and development process and how the regulatory changes and the impact on the stakeholders will impact potential route to market. So the lack of predictability, there can be a lack of responses from the notified body due to their workload, then interpretations of the requirements interpretations of the guidelines. So the mention of the guidelines here is significant, and we'll mention that again later on as we see this as a potential for helping with innovation in the future. But in general, there's so many new processes, it will take time to harmonize. With the IVDR, as I mentioned, the transition timelines, so the date of application stayed the same, but we've longer timelines for implementation. Class D products be 2025, Class C products 2026, and 2027 for existing sterile Class A and B devices. So the impact of all this on innovation, as I mentioned, mainly will impact businesses which are in the process of developing new products. So route to market is always a critical part of any medical device diagnostics business. Regulatory requirements have increased. In practical terms, how this has been manifested is the QMS, so the quality management system, has multiple increased requirements. And many of these are in place already, and it's the responsibility of the company. They are being audited on these aspects already. So economic operators, definitions and controls, suppliers control, the PORC been brought in, post-market surveillance, and device testing, better documented performance in the development life cycle. So has there been an impact on innovation? There has been already and will continue to be. It's common to have had portfolio reductions in many companies across the industry. Specifically on the design and development life cycle, and we look at this again in a bit more detail in the next slide. So for most companies involved in medical device diagnostics, design and development is a really crucial process. So whether they're compliant with ISO 13485 or 21 CFR Part 820, the design and development aspect of that is critical, and this has been impacted. So the QMS product lifecycle impacted the documentation. Changes are significant. The testing stages of verification and validation have been impacted. Product testing requirements have been increased, specifically looking at clinical testing requirements. So all of these changes would impact time, resources, and expense. So any company involved in bringing new products to market, it's very significant. And then the review and approval stages is a new addition for EU plan. So due to the up-classification of a lot of medical devices, the pre-approval process is more arduous than before. And as I've mentioned, specifically for diagnostic products, the pre-approval process wasn't in place before. And now with the pre-approval process for up to 80% of products that are on the market. So if we want to take a look at this at a very high level, any of you involved in design and development will know this is a very high level graphic description of the design and development process based on FDA guidance or ISO 13485. So you've the various discrete parts of design and development, from design conception all the way to product launch. And what all companies are interested in is how we can get that route to market as efficient as possible, and how can we get to product launch. So design, conception, development, the verification, validation, testing, and what I've tried to illustrate here graphically is that in the past, for example, where products didn't need pre-approval from notified body, the launch of a product could be done based on signing declaration of conformity once V&V testing was complete. Whereas now we will have this submission, review and approval process before we can mark the product with notified body number approval on it. Also, what's very significant is this V&V testing stage will be elongated, because now the requirement for clinical testing, which may not have been done in the previous system, was not as a significant requirement, is now in place. So you have multiple different aspects here, all leading to a longer process, possibly a more expensive process until we get product launch. And again, over time, this may become much more efficient for companies, but it's a new requirement. And even though the transition period has been long, many companies will still find this a challenge. So for the design and development, can all companies compete? Are small and medium enterprises an innovation disadvantage? So the possibilities there are, yes, that for small and medium enterprises, smaller companies, the increased requirements are more of a drain on their resources. Possibly these companies would be the ones who are more interested in innovation, bringing new products to market. That number one, it may take longer, and number two, well, maybe they won't be able to launch as many products, and the resources won't be allowed them bring as many products to market. So will these new products get to market as before? There's a potential significant loss of older products, legacy products, and a reduction in the new product pipeline also. So the industry impact, and many SMEs either have no notified body or if a notified body has not been designated. So this one, the significant unintended consequences of the changes that many companies may not have been aware that either their notified body wouldn't qualify in the future, or when they went looking for a new notified body, that many of them are not able to take on new business as readily as they would have been before. Progress to certification is slower. So there's limited MDR certificates have been issued for small and medium enterprises as opposed to large companies. And SMEs account for about 26% of the total number of devices expected in the market by May 2024, but 40% of the total certificates. So there's an imbalance there, which again makes it more difficult. So the route to market in the EU has been impacted, and we're going to look at that as regards how it compares with other markets globally. But before the IVDR MDR, specifically for IVDR, self-declared products could go to market, as we've mentioned on the signing of TOC, and those 80% of those products. Medical device up-classification and notified body pre-approval have increased significantly. The slower process, possibly that will make it less attractive because there's higher investment. And I know from listening to some of our speakers this morning, developing health technologies is a risky business. And, the case for innovation has to be compelling in order for companies to invest. And then also the alternative route, which would have been lab developed test, LDT, is included within the IVDR regulation, and that will be more challenging as well as it changes the responsibilities on the healthcare institutions. So as we mentioned before, up to 70% of clinical decisions based on IVD test results. And in the past, the regulatory requirements for what may have been a PMA high-risk products in the US would have been a self-declared low-risk product in the EU. So maybe this makes sense from the point of view of the regulatory aspect of it, that the IVDD came into place many years ago and was a very basic, simple list system. As all this new diagnostic test products came on the market, if they weren't in the list system, they're basically considered low risk. And did that make sense? And in reality, the changes have made it more like the FDA system, which is one of pre-approval. So the challenges. So the increased burden on business comes down to a few different aspects. One is the increased QMS infrastructure, a longer product development life cycle due to the increased development testing requirements and the review and approval step by the notified body. The launch process is delayed by this notified body review and approval process, and the impact on innovation timelines and the resources applied to support new product development is significant. Innovation, sorry, let's go back there. Innovation in the future. So software as a medical device is something that is going to continue to evolve and continue to expand, and innovation in this area will continue to progress. Digital health is another area which not only the last 20 years has been created and expanded, but that will continue. Artificial intelligence or AI, another area. So all these are expanding areas for future regulatory updates. So the global considerations. So with all these changes, as I've said, it's very timely to have a conversation like this as all the changes are currently being brought in. What will that do to the EU as a market for innovation? The USA process, which for most of these products would be a pre-approval 510(k) process with clinical data requirements is well established and has been in place for a long time, and companies have been using it. So does this mean, in effect, that whereas in the past companies would have been launching in the EU first and then gone to the US, will it just mean that the processes are more aligned, so the launch for the EU and the US will be at the same time? If this is done through better testing and better developed products, is that a negative? Or is it one of the aims of the regulatory changes to ensure that better products are coming to market, and that once all these processes and bottlenecks get resolved, that we'll have a better system bringing better products to market with more streamlined processes? Mentioning also the UK here, so the opportunities for the MHRA processes to allow for flexibility and alternative approaches. As being outside the EU, there will be different regulations in place for the UK market. So just touching again on the FDA. So the FDA always have this dual mandate, which is to promote and protect public health. That dual mandate gives them a balance. So to promote and protect public health, protection would be based on the regulation and the pre-approval process, but the aim to promote public health would mean that they would be promoting innovation and ensuring that the best technology is available to the American market in as timely a manner as possible. So it's a balanced approach. They also have well-established processes such as the Q submission, which allow for more predictable timelines. Maybe this is something that could be in the future, something that will come in with notified bodies also. So the FDA's focus on this is more clearly identified when you look at what their strategic priorities are. And one of the strategic priorities for FDA in 22 to 25 report is they want more than 50% of manufacturers of newly authorized novel technologies for the US market bringing their device to the US first or in parallel with other major markets. So that's quite a aim and a target to have in there. As I've said, they already have the Q submission process, which facilitates better regulatory planning, both for the industry, and is in place to facilitate more efficient review and approval times for FDA themselves, so all stakeholders benefit. There's also modular PMA processes. So they have been innovative over the years in trying to change and improve the processes to facilitate innovative products being brought to the market. So the targets for review and approval times are publicly available. The CDRH also has collaboration using the MDDT, which is the Medical Device Development Tools. They have definition for a small business and lower fees for a small business. And the guidances they have, they develop each year and they bring out more and more guidance each year. So all of these aspects really allow the FDA to support innovation and the interaction with the manufacturers, very helpful in bringing products to market. In the UK, so the government feedback consultation on the future UK MDOR. So obviously the MHRA will be the decision makers here, but there's already in this consultation document that has been developed over the last couple of years in consultation with industry. They're looking at software, they're looking at potential for conditional authorization. So all these aspects will be looking at innovation and how they can work with industry to get the medical device products to market. But when you look through the language here, it's quite interesting. I've just highlighted, sorry, skip back one. I've just highlighted this one. I've just highlighted some of the key phrases. So they mention innovation, they mention quality and safety standards. They're looking at proportionate regulation, appropriate regulations, aligning with international best practice, and diverging where there is benefits to doing so. So it's quite interesting when you look at this, you look at the FDA website, you look at the aims behind the EU and the regulatory changes, all the different markets are looking for this balance. They want better, safe, effective products on the market, yet they want to facilitate the stakeholders bringing those products to the market. So in summary, the regulations aim to improve patient safety and public health. The aim is not to stifle innovation, but as we've seen throughout this presentation, there are unintended consequences. I think when it comes to changing regulations on this scale over this time period, it's been over 20 years since the regulation brought in place. There's very significant changes. Therefore, there are very significant consequences. So all stakeholders need time to adapt to the new environment. The extensions to both MDR and IVDR have been necessary and welcome, I think, by all parties. The key issues still remain notified capacity, which would hope will be temporary. And as that capacity increases, the current short-term bottleneck will change. The regulatory infrastructure, such as UDMED and reference labs, will all be brought into place. And then the industry development processes. So as industry gets used to these new processes, they can streamline and become more efficient. So basically, new systems and processes need to balance the concern for patient safety with the market needs innovation to better serve the patient needs. So the comprehensive regulatory changes will impact all stakeholders. The modern technology will impact patients' lives, and that will continue. So digital health, artificial intelligence, software is going to continue to progress at pace. The MDC guidance documents are going to be invaluable, and they are issued regularly. So along with FDA guidance documents, there's also MDCGs issued on a regular basis. And the common technical specifications have the potential for assisting future implementation, but that new processes take time. So thank you all for your attention. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Seán. Truly a great overview of the current and upcoming innovations and the whole topic of regulation. We have a few questions, but we don't have much time, so I'm just going to choose one that stood out to me, and then later on I'm going to forward you the other questions. So this one is quite interesting. It says, if Europe could copy one thing from the USA or the FDA to adapt in terms of regulations, what would that be?
Good question. I would think the Q submission process, the pre-submission process, is the one aspect that I think industry has really benefited from, and it benefits the FDA just as much. You get much better regulatory pathway and planning, and you get better review and approval times. So currently the notified bodies don't consult, and maybe in the future it could be something that there's more interaction. But I think as the experience becomes better, it may happen in an organic way anyway. But definitely I think that's one of the best aspects of dealing with FDA.
For sure, thank you. I hope this answers the question to our audience. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attendance and your for contribution. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again attending Biotech Atelier maybe next year. Thank you, and to PharmaLex as well for appointing you as a lecturer and for their contribution. And with that, I would like to point out to our audience that we have a 10-minute break before continuing with our next keynote session, and we'll be back at the full hour, so 3 o'clock for us here in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe, and then 2 o'clock for Central European time. Thank you all, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Laura.
Bye-bye. Thank you.